If you have a California trust and you're dealing with trust interpretation issues, you're looking at language and maybe you're not quite sure what it says, or there's a disagreement among the beneficiaries as to what exactly that language means, you're going to have to use the trust interpretation rules that are set out in the California Probate Code. One of the basic rules for trust interpretation is that every word, every paragraph, every section of a trust must be given some meaning, if it's possible to do that. What the court presumes, or what the law presumes, is that somebody wouldn't have used those words, they wouldn't have used that section, they wouldn't have used that paragraph if they didn't intend for it to have some meaning. And for that reason, every portion of the trust has to have some meaning. So for example, a couple of times I've worked on cases where somebody says, I want my house to go to my kids outright and free of trust. And then in a separate section it'll say, I want my spouse to have the right to live in that house for the rest of her life. The problem is those two sections can conflict, because if a house goes outright to the kids, then there can't be a right for the spouse to live there for the rest of her life. On the other hand, if the spouse has the right to live there, then it makes no sense that the house is being distributed out to the kids outright. So then the court has to interpret that language. It has to decide, how are we going to read this language so that it makes some sense to somebody and we can administer this trust the way the settlor intended for it to be administered. That means the court has to look at those two provisions and it has to give some meaning to each provision. And so the court has to take into account the fact that the spouse is supposed to get a life estate. At the same time, the court has to take into account the fact that the kids are supposed to get something out of it as well. And maybe the court fashions a remedy by giving the wife a life estate or allow her to live there for a term of years, and then allow the trust to pass out, the house to pass out to the kids. In every one of these cases, the trust rules are very clear. The court must give some meaning to each provision in a trust when it's interpreting trust language.